Hi, my name is Melissa Nyoni, and this is my disability presentation for Education 684. I'll be talking to you today about specific learning disabilities in mathematics. Students with learning disabilities make up 5% of the total school population. Slightly more than half of the students receiving special education services have learning disabilities, making them the largest and one of the fastest growing groups of students with disabilities. It's extremely important that we understand these students and look for ways to help them as educators. So, the IDEA definition of a specific learning disability is a disorder in which one or more of the basic psychological processes involved in understanding or in using language manifested by an imperfect ability to listen, think, speak, read, write, spell, or do mathematical calculations. There is both an exclusionary standard, an inclusionary standard, and an exclusionary standard. Um, Specific learning disabilities include students who may have perceptual disabilities, brain injury, minimum brain dysfunction, dyslexia, and developmental aphasia. But they exclude students whose learning disability is the result of a physical impairment, such as visual or hearing or motor disabilities associated with intellectual disability, or as the result of an emotional disturbance or of environmental, cultural, or economic disadvantage. This is the official definition from IDA. And for our purposes, we're going to focus today mostly on those who present these disorders in mathematical calculations. Signs of a possible disability include learning difficulties that have persisted for more than 6 months despite interventions. This means that students have potentially been receiving tier one and maybe tier two supports, and yet even with these research-based instructional practices, they're still seeing delays in their mathematical skills and development. Students who may have math learning disability are probably presenting skills that are substantially below those expected for their age or grade level. The deficits should interfere with their functioning and are confirmed by either standardized testing, classroom testing, or other clinical assessments. Deficits may exist in number sense, memorization of math facts, calculation, and math reasoning. So learning disabilities in mathematics can present themselves in a variety of different ways for students with math skills. The identification process for students with learning disability in mathematics involves a multidisciplinary evaluation process and can be done either with the discrepancy model that looks at the difference between their IQ and their performance, or through a response to intervention model, or an alternative research-based procedure according to IDA. Here are some common symptoms that you might witness by grade band of students that could be showing that they could possess a learning disability in mathematics. In the preschool years, you may observe difficulty with counting and sorting, or with corresponding numbers and objects, or with the auditory memory of numbers, maybe remembering a phone number or something like that. In the early elementary years, students can present trouble with number recognition, difficulty learning math facts, understanding problem solving skills, and many times having anxiety when math tasks are approached. In late elementary and middle school, you may continue to see that anxiety, as well as difficulties with precision, recalling patterns, sequencing multi-step problems, and understanding real-world applications. For these students, those real-world word problems could be very difficult for them. In high school, we continue to see struggling with applying math to life skills, trouble with measurements, potentially difficulties with graphs and charts, and difficulties when problems are presented that could have multiple approaches to solving them. Some of the causes of learning disabilities in mathematics include problems in the brain, neurological mechanisms. Research has shown that there can be structural brain differences in the areas of the brain that are associated with numerosity and procedural memory for students with math learning disabilities. Research has also found that there are genetic links to math learning disabilities, genetic mutations and polymorphisms, as well as certain genetic conditions such as Turner syndrome and Fragile X syndrome have all been shown to be linked to students having math learning disabilities. In addition, there can be environmental causes that can contribute to a student's math learning disabilities. There could be negative effects associated with poverty, or with low access or income rates that can relate to slower growth and development in these students, impacting their ability to learn mathematics. Some common characteristics of students with math learning disabilities include difficulties with academic achievement, as well as having average or above average intelligence. Many of these students are very bright, but they just struggle with their achievement in mathematics. This means that they could even have above average intelligence overall and really exceptional skills in other areas, but are having problems with the procedural processing of mathematics. Procedural problems are typical for these students, difficulty understanding math concepts, the frequent errors, difficulty with computing math problems and with sequencing steps, both in math class as well as maybe in other areas where sequencing is required. Fact retrieval is a very common issue for students with learning disabilities in math, as well as difficulties with their short-term, long-term, or working memory. Students may also experience some emotional difficulties. They could be more likely to experience depression or anxiety related to the increased difficulties they're experiencing learning. These could be associated specifically with when math tasks are being asked to be performed. There are a lot of myths and misconceptions out there, though, about students who have a learning disability in math. One common misconception is that math learning disabilities are not as common as reading disabilities. That is not really true. Although they're talked about less, math learning disabilities, sometimes called dyscalculia, may be as common as dyslexia, which people have heard about a lot more often. Another common myth is that all students with math learning disabilities have the same difficulties, that they struggle with the exact same skills. And that's not true either. Students may struggle with a variety of different skills, as well as excel in other skills. They may have problems with their working memory, with using charts or graphs, with remembering math facts, or with solving complex problems. Another myth is that kids with math learning disabilities just cannot learn math. Well, research has shown that multisensory instruction, classroom accommodations, graphic organizers, and research-based educational practices all have proven successful strategies for helping students with learning disabilities in math to really excel in mathematics. Another common myth is that learning students with learning disabilities are not capable of conceptual understanding. But new research has shown that students are capable of developing strategies and that it may reduce memory strain when they're able to use those strategies effectively in their math classrooms. Learning disability students are not capable of developing and using their own strategies is another myth that you encounter in the math classroom. And this has also been disproven. Many students with math learning disabilities show strengths in 3D spatial thinking, making connections, and even discerning patterns, meaning that these students are capable of developing strategies of solving math procedures in many different ways and may even have strengths in that area while struggling with the more typical approach to mathematics instruction. Some additional challenges that educators may encounter with students with learning math disabilities. Obviously, could be issues with educational performance. Students' work could be inconsistent or poor in quality, and they could struggle with producing the math work that you're hoping to see. This could impact students' attitude in the classroom and may cause them to avoid or fail to complete work in their areas of weakness. This can also affect student social interactions. Students with math learning abilities may have difficulty with social cues, facial gestures, or verbal inflections. They may also seek to hide their challenges with other behaviors or activities, and their behavior can potentially disrupt students around them. In order to get out of struggling or challenging work, these students may cause distractions or disruptions for their peers, and this can be a challenge for educators. Thankfully, there are many teaching strategies to support students with math learning disabilities that have been found to be effective and productive in the math classroom. Some general tips for teaching students with math learning disabilities is to use research-based, culture-responsive, and universally designed instructional practices to implement strong progress monitoring procedures and to provide focused hands-on and interactive curriculum. Giving students the opportunity for concrete understanding of math concepts can really help to develop their math skills. Explicit instruction has also been shown to be a very effective strategy for students with math learning disabilities, providing students with many opportunities to respond and have both guided and individual practice is very important as well. Utilizing small group instruction in Tier 2 RTI programs, as well as individualized Tier 3 RTI instruction, has also been effective. Implementing inclusive teaching models with collaborative instruction provided by general and special educators. This could look like special educators coming into the general education classroom and providing support during mathematics instruction. And this can be very effective for students with math learning disabilities. Also, teaching the language of mathematics is extremely important for these students. Math has its own vocabulary, its own terms, and helping students to understand the general, technical, and symbolic vocabulary that exists in mathematics can really strengthen their understanding for those students with learning disabilities. Some of the important aspects of teaching students with learning disabilities in mathematics is helping them to develop their math, facts, and procedural skills. A few different methods can be associated with helping that. One is the demonstration plus model. This model uses keywords when explicitly teaching math skills to first model for those students and use the keywords that will trigger their understanding of the computation and allowing them to use examples and the keywords to continue to develop those skills. Mental calculation shortcuts can also be very helpful. This, in essence, is helping students develop number sense, where you use combinations that students know, such as 3 plus 3 equals 6, and you relate that to how then 3 plus 4 equals 7, just like it would be related to counting. Also, a number sense that helps them to understand the relational properties between mathematics, such as 7 plus 2 equals 9 means that 9 minus 2 equals 7. Varying the instructional sequence can also be helpful for these students, helping them to learn math facts in cluster groups that are similar, or through count-on methods, or by using near facts such as 5 times 6. Learning 5 times 6 by adding 5 to 5 times 5 can help them to create that framework of interconnectedness between numbers that can really help them to better understand and develop these areas that are difficult for them. In addition, promoting mastery and authenticity, this can just be done through repetition and through math practice programs have been shown to be helpful for students with math learning disabilities. Finally, it's important to always match our instruction to the error patterns that we're seeing. As previously stated, students with math learning disabilities do not all struggle with the same thing. So analyzing student performance, using those progress monitoring techniques to help identify the patterns that each specific student is struggling with can help you to select the most appropriate instructional strategies to support those students. Teaching aids and accommodations can also be very helpful for teaching students with math learning disabilities. Manipulatives are often used in mathematics, and these can be used at a very early age with basic counters, as well as up into even the secondary grade levels with algebraic manipulatives that help students to visualize the pieces in an equation. Visuals are also helpful. Drawings, diagrams, and graphic organizers, especially graphic organizers that help students break down word problems or algebraic expressions into pieces, can be very helpful for them to learn the concepts, patterns, relationships, and steps that are associated with performing mathematics calculations. Technology can also be a very useful aid. There are many online math learning videos and multimedia presentations, as well as games and drill practice programs that can be engaging for students and help present the content in a way that makes practicing fun. It can also give them opportunities to respond and to receive feedback, and for you as an instructor to keep track of the specific areas where they may be struggling and provide additional support. Calculators are also a great tool for students with math learning disabilities to use, especially in the upper grades. Calculators can help support students with those basic fact retrieval calculations so that they can perform more complex math problems independently. It's important because this can help to foster fluency as well as build confidence and allow students to learn those more complex skills. A few strategies that are helpful for helping students to problem solve Each one of these strategies involves a word. These are great strategies because students can learn these and then they can apply them on their own. And that's a great way for them to have a tool at the ready to help them with problems. The first one is the RIDE strategy. This one is helpful for word problems because it helps students to learn abstract reasoning, attention, memory, and visual spatial skills. It basically gives them a remember, identify, determine, and enter strategy for looking at a word problem. The TIN strategy is also a good strategy for working with word problems. It helps them to identify the different steps that are needed to solve a word problem. The STAR strategy can be very helpful for algebraic reasoning in the upper grades. Um, Again, this can be applied to word problems that students receive where they search the word problem, they look for those main words, highlight and translate them, answer the problem, and review the problem. Finally, one model that has been shown to be very helpful for students with learning disabilities in mathematics is the concrete representational abstract teaching sequence. This essentially takes students through different stages of learning mathematics. In the concrete step, students use objects like those manipulatives to learn and understand basic number sense. That is the foundation for later mathematics instruction. During the representational stage, students use pictures or other things to represent the math problems that can help them to visualize and build connections beyond just the numbers. And then finally, once students have mastered those stages, they can move on to the abstract and begin to really understand the symbolic nature of mathematics. Using this approach has been very useful for students with math learning disabilities. There, of course, are many other strategies out there, but the important key is to give students strategies that can support their own learning as well as equip them with skills to tackle challenging problems independently in the future. So that is my presentation on math learning disabilities. I hope that you have enjoyed it and you've learned a lot. As you reflect on what you've learned, I ask you to consider your own experience with students who have learning disabilities in mathematics. Maybe you've personally experienced this in some way. If you haven't, reflect on what you've learned during the presentation and consider this question. How could you use your knowledge of mathematics learning disabilities and these students' unique strengths and needs to assist them in your classroom? Thank you for taking the time to listen and have a wonderful day.